Hey guys, this week we kind of talked about and read A Midsummer Night's Dream, and here's a few things that I thought were very interesting. Um, Nothing, it's very broad, but the storylines within this play I thought were very strange, but at the same time they made sense by the end of the play. The storylines that I'm talking about are one, the Athenians, so Helena, Hermia, um, Demetrius and Lysander, that storyline. And then we had the whole storyline with the fairies. And then we had the storyline with the men who were kind of making the play, which came to light towards the end of the play. I thought all those storylines were very separate, but at the same time they intertwined with each other. I thought that was very, very interesting, and I think in all significant. I really think that the storylines within the play kind of hinted towards the very separate couples that ended up together. So, like the separate people who ended up together, and their whole dramatic love story of Helena not being loved by anyone and then being loved by Demetrius in the end, who once loved Hermia, who was loved by Lysander, and then Demetrius and Lysander both loved Helena for a sort of time. So I think like these storylines coming together was also significant of the fact that the couples ended up happy together. Two values that I saw within the play were one, love, and two, power. I think love is in a lot of these Shakespearean type of plays, plays, yes. So the love, obviously, the endless drama between the couples, which was, like I said before in the first question, like Lysander loving Hermia, and then Demetrius following after Hermia, loving her as well, and then they both turn, and Lysander and Demetrius love Helena after they were struck with that love potion put in their eyes. And then in the end, Demetrius fell in love with Helena, and then Lysander fell in love with, was always in love with, but loved Helena, but then fell in love and ultimately ended up with Hermia. I thought that was a huge, huge show of love. And then I also saw the love between the king and queen fairy. They both obviously loved each other, and that brings me to my next point, power. The king and queen fairy showed kind of like their power when the king ended up putting a love potion on his wife and the queen fairy and made her fall in love again, fell in love with an ass just to show his power over her. And then also, Hermia's father showed his power over her and how he owned her as a woman. It was his daughter, so his will was the will to be done, especially in her love life. He showed power over her and ultimately was making the decision on who she was going to marry. She either could die, go to a convent and become a nun and live singly, or marry Demetrius. And then in the end, the king overruled Hermia's father's power, but then again, that's another show of power that I thought was very significant. So something I had to look up towards the beginning actually was the character list. In order for me to kind of read this and understand it, I had to look up the character list and see like who was a fairy, who was human, what was going on with the play, like within the play. I was very, and I know this is something we talked about, play within a play, but it was really confusing to me at first until I looked up like the character list and who was who, and found out that Puck was a jester for the king fairy, and the king and queen were fairies, and then some of the characters were Athenians and humans, and then Bottom was, he looked like an ass, but he was not really an ass. He was just an ass in the queen fairy's eyes, and I just kind of had to get that all sorted out in my mind in order to fully envision this play. And it also really helped. After looking up the character list, I decided to read along and then listen to the audio of the play. So hearing other people's voices and not just my own inside my head really helped me put together the different aspects of this play and really start to understand and organize it with a lot of things going on inside of this Shakespearean play. So femininity and masculinity, we have seen in the last play that we looked at, Bacchae, that women were inferior. They were made for the home, and they almost were like the kitchen wives, and they were in the kitchen, and they were owned by the men. Well, we see a similar theme here as well. The women were owned by the men, and that is seen by Hermia's father saying, literally, he controls her. His will be done when it comes to who she marries. It was all his decision, basically. And then also with the king playing tricks, the king fairy playing tricks on his wife, I think that was a very big show of like his power, his masculinity, and him owning her. And then she never got back at him. I mean, if I were her, I would definitely get back at him. But then again, like in this play, we had to show that, or the men had to show that they were the powerful ones. They owned the women. And then, so in Shakespeare's time, we know that all of these characters would have been played by men, and I think that was also shown in the fact that in the play, within the play, all of those characters were men. And something that I really like to think about was back in that time, however the men perceived how women acted was how they played them on stage. So I think that had a really big thing to do with how women were perceived at that time. When I say like they all had high voices and they were dainty and they deserved to be in the kitchen, in the home, and owned by the men, I think these plays were a huge factor in shaping the perception of women during that time. And two questions that I leave you with were, what is the significance of the play put on within the play? What is the significance of that? Why did Shakespeare put that in? And then also, what is the significance behind some of this play taking place in a wood, which quote unquote a wood? So, thank you.